Hello, everyone. This is Coresair Mack, President of the Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association, and today I am joined by our very own special guest, Dr. Matthew Glowiak. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, and I'm honored that you had contacted me for this interview. It's truly a delight to be able to see you again and be able to speak to the Illinois Mental Health Counseling Association. And, just again, thank you very much. I'm humbled and honored by this, and today's been a good day so far, and I'm really looking forward to this opportunity.
Yeah,
How are you?
excellent. I am doing good. I'm wide awake, surprisingly, for a Friday, right? Ready for this 3-day weekend and hopefully no more snow. Fingers crossed. And I probably just jinxed
Yeah,
us.
yeah, we had that light little dusting this morning, and yes, I'm still waking up a little bit here, so I got my cup of coffee, so don't mind me as we go along here. But looking forward to the 3-day weekend here as well.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So, for those that don't know, Matthew and I have a little bit of history together. I first saw him when I was a graduate student at Northern Illinois University. He came and presented on marketing, showed us how to create videos on a cell phone, which is surprisingly how I started off doing my own YouTube channel with this creating videos on a cell phone. So, I used a lot of what you taught me in the
Nice.
past.
Nice. I
So,
think that that's absolutely amazing. And look how far along it's come since then. When I finished my
mhm,
master's degree, it was 2010. Really, we're in the infancy of all of this. And now it's the way of the world, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic.
yeah, exactly. So you were onto something there. If only they would have saw it, what, 6 years later? Right.
It was a long time ago, yes.
All right. So your fans want to know, Matt, how did you become interested in counseling?
Well, the short answer is that the MMPI2 told me to be a counselor. It was a really interesting experience. When I went into my undergraduate at University of Illinois, I went into pre-med bioengineering and knew I wanted to be a doctor of something. And I was really interested in becoming a pediatrician. I'll be honest, chemistry was not my forte in college, unfortunately, and got lost a little bit. And it was interesting because I had a roommate who was in the psychology programs. Like, you really seem like a psychologist type of guy. You're really great at interacting with people. You're great at keeping confidentiality, holding on to secrets. Advice is on point. You're just like this warm, caring person. Well, why don't you think about psychology? And, I wasn't completely sold on the idea right away, but then I started to think back into my life. And I'm like, well, I did peer mediators in middle school as well as high school. So that was a little touch on what counseling could look like. You had an uncle who was a social worker who was very into mental health and exposed me to a lot of that while I was growing up. A lot of mental health disorders, addiction ran in the family, and so on. So I was exposed to that, vicariously as a youngster. Didn't necessarily understand what it was at the time. Now I do, fortunately. But after trying to figure out what it was I was going to do and chemistry was my shortcoming, I spoke to some different advisors and they told me, well, why don't you take an educational psychology class, based off everything that you're saying here. And when I'm picking up on your personality, I think you'd be a really great psychologist. But, how about you go into this educational psychology class and, find out who you are. So in that class, we did the Holland codes, the IMHCA. We took the MMPI2, so on and so forth. And really the pivotal moment in my life was when I received the results of the MMPI2. There was this long, long, long summary that read my personality back to me better than I even knew myself. And I'm not going to lie to you. I remember the moment clearly. The hair on my arms and my back of my neck stood on end. And I got this tingly feeling as I was reading the whole thing. And at the very end, it said that you are suited to be a psychologist or a teacher. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be both. So that next day, I went back in to the advisor who encouraged me to take the educational psychology class. He said, hey, I'm really feeling the psychology route. I think that that's where I want to move forward. And that's what we did. So I ended up switching my major, taking all the classes. And fortunately, I was able to graduate in the 4 years. And then the rest was history.
All right, perfect. Perfect. And that perfectly segues into the next question. So what schools did you go for your undergraduate, graduate, and your postgraduate degrees?
Absolutely. So As I said a few moments ago, for my undergraduate, I was at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Go Illini. I was a trombone player in the Marching Illini, and it was a really great time. And while I was there, as I said, I found my footing as a psychology major. Had a really great experience with everything there. I truly appreciated my opportunities with the professors. I did get to do a little bit of kind of an internship while I was there. Worked with a Champaign County juvenile offender outreach program where I worked with a couple of adolescents who, they were arrested, committed small, little misdemeanor type of crimes.
Okay.
And rather than going to the detention center, I was able to work with them each one-on-one there. And I also did do a psych lab where I got to go through a bunch of the research. So stuff back in the day, I graduated from University of Illinois in 2005, and I did the lab between 2003 and 4. We didn't have the technology we have today. So I remember I was sitting in the armory, and like, what you're going to do is you're going to take all these surveys, you're going to input all the numbers into an Excel spreadsheet and take as long as it really needs, but get it done by the end of the term. So I go into this little office. I remember opening the door, and about 25 boxes. Each of them had about 150 surveys in it. So I just remember plugging away, plugging away, plugging away. I was like, I don't know if this is exactly going to be the route of psychology I want to go, but it was still a positive experience, and it opened up some different opportunities at the university. For graduate school, I did take a couple years off after I graduated from University of Illinois, got my bachelor's, because I did need to start working full time, pay for my own apartment, car, phone bill, all that good stuff. And I worked this logistics job. But about a year and a half later, I decided, hey, I'm going to take the plunge and I want to go back to school. I want to go the whole way with all of this. And when I was looking at different programs in the area, at the time I was working a 10-hour-a-day job. I couldn't really sacrifice what I was doing there because I needed to be able to pay for school. So I ultimately found Walden University. At the time, really took a chance. It was remote education, being a guy who came from a Big Ten university. I'm an extroverted. I'm into the social scene. I like the football games, basketball games, and just being around a bunch of people. So trying to do something remote was a lot different. And looking around, there weren't very many programs available for such a thing. So I enrolled in the Master's in Mental Health Counseling program. And honestly, the whole entire experience just completely changed my life. And, I had such a positive experience while I was there in the Master's program. And toward the end, I became, a member of the American Counseling Association, Chi Sigma Iota, Illinois Counseling Association, and that's really where that piece started. But things went really well, and at my master's graduation, who ultimately ended up becoming my dissertation chair, Dr. Stacy Reihester, said, hey, if you come in, you do the PhD program, you can write in your first article with me. We're doing, a case study. It's a second case study on, transgender type of trauma. I'll give you an opportunity. You can write the literature review. You can do the conclusion, things like that. So I said, okay, fine. That's a great incentive to start off with a doctoral program. So I did enroll. I took one term off between the master's and the PhD. Needed a little bit of a break, as I'm very high energy. I could be the guy who works 12 hours plus a day, just always on. And so took a term off and came back into that, wrote that article, and then just everything started to accelerate from there. And this was their doctorate in counselor education and supervision program. So I did that. And I remember my next term, I took that article, shared it with another instructor. She's like, hey, you know what? That's great. Yeah, here's another opportunity. I'm writing a textbook chapter. Do you want to write the introduction, conclusion, and the thinking thought bubbles? You have 2 weeks to get it done. So, sure, why not? This is awesome. So I went and I did that. She was impressed with my work. And with that, I got really excited, and I shared it with my other instructor where I was doing really well in his class. And he was a former ACA president, David Capuzzi. And so I was like, hey, Dr. Capuzzi, look at this. I just wrote in a textbook chapter. Do you have any opportunities? He writes me back. And it was the funniest thing. He's like, do you realize whose textbook that was that you just wrote the chapter in? I was like, who? He's like, me. That's my book.
Oh,
I was like, wait, what? Drew an immediate connection. And then from there, I ultimately became a TA, started writing textbook chapters for him and so on. And then, it was just from that point, I was making different connections, going to the ACA conference, it was, volunteering and so on, ultimately started to move up with Chi Sigma Iota International. I was fortunate in 2014 to be named one of the 10 leadership fellows. And it was especially awesome because it was in 2014 when the conference was in Hawaii. So that was a pretty great time. So ultimately had a great experience, tried to maximize everything. But what was really unique about it, which was different to other students in Illinois at the time, was that I was building this outside in type of a network, if you will. So there were maybe 6 or 7 other students in the program who were from the state of Illinois, and we were all over the place. No one else was right next to me at all. And so a lot of it was really trying to figure this out on my own. My instructors were in Washington and Tennessee and Florida and Texas, all over the place. But the great thing was that they would invite me to different conferences. Hey, do you want to present with me? Hey, do you want to write this with me? Do you want to do this? So on and so forth. So I was presenting and writing all over the place, but had this outside in type of network. So what ultimately was unique when I graduated, with my master's and was looking for the clinical work and nearing the end of my doctorate, I did have a hard time trying to find a job at first because it was relatively unique graduating from an online university. People are like, hey, counseling, it's interpersonal, it's face to face. You need to have that human connection. I don't understand what an online program can do, so I almost had to, really prove myself and show, hey, all those books you have on your shelf, I've read them. Ask me any questions. Do you want to know the things I'm doing? These are the articles I've written, textbooks, presentations I've done. Many people were pretty awestruck by that. And they're like, wait, this is from an online education? I said, yeah. So when I was really trying to get my footing with Illinois Counseling Association, meeting people with IMHCA and so on, everybody was, pretty close knit, Northern Illinois University. Unfortunately, that's where I did my externship, and we were able to meet each other there and met a lot of wonderful people, met people from the other institutions, but they didn't know who I was. And so in really trying to promote the online institution, it was something kind of novel. I mean, we're talking 2010 now. I started this in 2007. At the time, that was frowned upon. There was a lot of stigma, telemental health, lots of concerns, wasn't even really a thought, but I was fortunate that I received from ICA an opportunity to write a 3-article series that talked about the experience of being an online student. What does that look like? Then there was the opportunity to write an article on how do you network online, doing this distance education when you're not face to face with people, and then spoke a little bit about my thoughts of telemental health potentially in the future. And that's where things really launched off. These little one-page articles, I would end up going to conferences and people are like, hey, you're the online education guy, asking me all these different types of questions and so on. And what's really prophetic about it is right now, starting 2020, we're in 2023 now, but the pandemic hit, COVID-19, lots of change, so what we saw was an influx of students going into the remote programs. We saw a lot of the traditional brick and mortar universities now starting to create, hybrid programs or fully remote types of programs. And that really became the way of the world. And, a lot of students, were practicing social distancing, more so I'll call it physical distancing because socially we can still connect and stuff like that. We're practicing physical distancing. A lot of people were struggling, emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally, and so on, due to the pandemic and having all these restrictions. So we saw a huge influx of students coming into these different types of programs. But at the same time, a lot of them were coming in, being mentally disturbed or having, mental health diagnoses that may have been diagnosed or otherwise, coming in and saying, okay, I'm going to be able to help myself get to a better place while working toward a degree, and just really being able to have their cake and eat it too. So we've seen this huge expansion in these types of programs, but fortunately technology has come a long way. And I'll tell you, Coresair, in 2017, when I started the remote education, I was terrified about it. I can't even say I fully believed in it. 2010, when I graduated, got a lot of pushback, stigma. Who are you? What is this? I don't think you're credible. And now look where we're at today. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And I feel so fortunate to have had that experience.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so true. A lot of people, especially in the counseling field, way back when believed that, just like what you mentioned, you do need that human to human interaction. But online programs really are the future, right? You can still get that experience and still be in an online class. And I think now a lot of people are starting to realize that more.
Absolutely. Well, and the great thing about it is the accessibility piece, for a lot of adult learners. And I can tell you right now, if I were to start a graduate program, really the only thing that would work for me would be something online. Being a father of 3, having my wife, having multiple jobs that I'm doing, always going out presenting, writing, and so on. I mean, it would be impractical for me to try to go to a traditional type of university like I did at University of Illinois and what that looked like. So it's really opening the doors for people who have always desired having the education, felt they wouldn't have the opportunity. So the flexibility really does go a long way. And same thing when we consider telemental health. think about accessibility issues for many of the clients who maybe they're working and they can't, they don't have the transportation to be able to get over there. A lot of these online platforms are more affordable than traditional type of counseling and so on. So it's really opened a lot of doors, but I will be honest with you in that I do think face-to-face, I'm a face-to-face type of guy. I get a rush when I'm presenting in front of a class or doing skills labs, they're face-to-face. But even still, the second best thing is doing what we do here. And it's really helped so many people. And the other great thing I like about it too is now we're opening up opportunities for people who have substantial talent, who could be some of the best in the field, who again, otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity. So I think that this is a huge step forward in terms of advancing the quality of professionals in the field, as well as giving opportunity to those who need it most.
Oh yeah, definitely. So then speaking of opportunities and things like that, that perfectly segues, I'm going to say that a lot, right? But that perfectly
I like
segues to the
that.
next question, right? So then how long have you been doing therapy for?
So therapy I've been doing since 2012. I graduated with my master's at the tail end of 2010. And yeah, it was kind of unfortunate back in the day for those of you with the national counselor exams, probably a newer experience to some of you. Maybe some of you are looking forward to it soon. But when I took the test at the time, it was paper and pencil. So with that, I didn't get my results for about 8 weeks, found out I passed. Then it was winter break, so I couldn't get the signatures I needed to submit the state application. Finally got it. And then it took a little while to find an opportunity that worked for me. And, as many counselors find out when they get started, it's usually going to be a minimal pay type of experience, maybe PRN, part-time, no benefits if you're at a smaller organization, private practice. So it was really hard for me then to be able to support myself in a graduate PhD program while working, paying my mortgage, all that good stuff. So it did take me a little while to be able to find an opportunity that clicked. So it was 2012. Ended up getting an opportunity for a full-time job. The pay was acceptable there at the time, but working in a methadone clinic. And that was a really great experience for me. As I said, I originally, when I went to University of Illinois, wanted to be a pediatrician initially. When I went into counseling, I was thinking, okay, I'd like to open a children's clinic and so on. But it was really interesting throughout my master's internship was at an addiction treatment center. When I was at Northern Illinois doing my doctoral externship, the clients I connected the most with were those who were struggling with addiction. And then go figure, the first job opportunity that really worked, that was full-time for me to really be able to expand my wings, if you will, was at a methadone clinic working with clients with opioid use disorder. And what was really unique and great about that opportunity too, beyond being excited that this is my first full-time counseling job, I've got a 62 client caseload, I have my own cool little office and so on, worked with a lot of clients with co-occurring disorders. Many of them experienced past trauma. Many of them were struggling with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety, had clients on the schizophrenia spectrum, quite a few with bipolar 1 or 2 diagnoses, some of which were going unmedicated, a lot of personality disorders, borderline personality disorder being toward the top of that list. And so it really exposed me to a lot of what was going on in the world. And so while I was there, many of the counselors who came in were substance use counselors, your, certified alcohol and other drug counselor, not necessarily with the mental health background. But when I went in there, I was able to combine the best of both worlds. I was able to concurrently treat both the opioid use disorder as well as the mental health disorder. I was finding a lot of success there. And one of the things that was a huge advantage with that opportunity is, as you know, and I always share with my students and other professionals who come to speak to me, is that I was able to double dip because the methadone clinic was in a certified drug treatment program by the state of Illinois. I was able to use those hours towards sitting on the ICRC exam to become a certified advanced alcohol and other drug counselor. So I had my licensed professional counselor, my LPC, which I'll refer to as a novice license. You need your 2 years, your 3,600 plus hours, your 100 hours of supervision and so on. But I was able to double dip. The same hours I was using toward my state licensure, I was also able to use, toward being able to take the test to become a certified advanced alcohol and other drug counselor. So it was really great. And I was able to tie it all in together. And I actually took both exams within the same month passed. And then after that, I had the job opportunity at Benedictine University and had my first, master's of clinical psychology professor gig. And that's the point where I left the methadone clinic and also started to build a private practice. So a lot happened at once. And also the funny thing too, I've been laughing with people recently is, just how everything hits you, as a graduate student, it feels like, I'm just waiting for that light at the end of the tunnel. It seems so far away. But once you start to see that light, I'm telling you, it hits you like a freight train, a Mack truck, within the same month. Again, CAADC, LCPC, starting a private practice, starting at the university. And my wife went into labor my very first day of teaching at
Oh.
Benedictine University. I didn't even teach my first class. Yeah, the program director, she heard me speaking to my wife. She's like, "What's that? Your wife's in labor?" I was like, "Yeah." She said, "I don't have to come back till tomorrow because the contractions are too far apart." She's like, "You need to get out of here now. What are you doing? This is your first child. Take the week off." And so that was fun. And even before that, we moved into our house 3 weeks earlier. So a
Oh.
lot of these things, they do come together, and it kind of hits you, like I said, like a ton of bricks, but it's really exciting. So for those of you who are graduate students right now or just getting started, do know that the work, it pays off. It's hard. There's been a lot of times where I want to take my computer, throw it out the window and say, I don't want to do this. I'm never going to finish. But as long as you're diligent, as long as you're resilient, roll with the punches, pace yourself, and so on, you'll be surprised how everything comes together. And when it does, boom, comes quickly.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I know you spoke about this a little bit before
Mhm.
too, and about the place you start off working at. So, besides that, so what did you learn as a result from working at those places?
Learned a lot. I mean, the big thing, especially at the methadone clinic, it was a very humbling experience. I'm going to be honest with you. As I said earlier in this interview, there's a lot of mental health issues in my family, particularly my extended family, as well as addiction. So that's something that's always been around me. Something I've seen in the community, especially being a student at University of Illinois. That was a place that had major, major, major substance use issues and so on. So it was something always around me. It just seemed like it was, something that it kept calling me. It was weird. Like with my internships, it's like, oh, here you are. You're doing psychoeducational groups for individuals who are court mandated for DUIs, and just, the jobs and stuff I got. But even still, I kind of had that stigma in my head of like, how can somebody get to a point of just not working anymore, not paying the bills, not taking care of their kids, and just using heroin all day? Like, how can a person do that? And while I realized it was a disease, at the same time, I was still kind of holding on to the moral type of justification. And it was a couple weeks into working at the clinic. I was doing a lot of intakes, meeting a lot of transfer clients, and so on. I'm listening to their stories, and as I listened to their story, they broke my heart at Coresair. I mean, they like tore my heart out. It was really hard to hear. And I asked myself the question as I was driving home, and I was reflecting. I said, Matt, you know, if you live the life that this client just presented in front of you, Matt, if this was your life, can you guarantee that you wouldn't have been addicted to heroin or doing crystal meth or alcohol use disorder or anything? And my answer was no. I don't know if that would have been true for me. And that was the point that I really was able to empathize. I'm like, these people have been through some really hard times, and of course I had some of those clients who are kind of cocky, smart Alec Weisenheimer type that, oh yeah, I'm above this, I can stop at any time, and they had good lives, they were affluent, parents paid for everything, and they kind of dabbled with drugs and ultimately found themselves addicted and had the loss afterward. But even for them, I found myself feeling so much more compassionate and just like, this is such a sad situation, such a hard thing to be able to work through. And it just really, really, so now you have my education, combined with my experience, and I always have, again, I've been, a passionate person throughout my entire life and always dedicated to what I do. Whatever I do has to be high quality. But now you really got my soul attached to this, so going the extra mile, learning more, going to the SAMHSA store and ordering all their free, workbooks that they had, getting enrolled with the Betty Ford Hazelden Clinic. They had these online programs, that they had these groups at the time that was really great. I could refer to my clients to them and they get certificates for attending that they would share with me, and just, really delving in as deep as possible, into everything that we had there. And it was a great experience. It really was. It was a difficult experience. I've gotten sworn at many times. I had to do urine tests. I'd have urine bottles thrown at me. I was told I was lying on the drug test that came back positive. I'm like, well, you picked the test out of the box and I let you open it and I dipped it in, so I don't understand how it's false. So being able to see some of the manipulative type tactics, some of the things that people do, I was able to see some of the best and the worst in people. But that was a really important part of what it was, because when we talk about the stigma of mental health in general, I mean, it's big enough. And one of the positive things, I'll say silver lining, if you will, with the pandemic, is I do think that it brought mental health to the surface. We're talking about it a lot more now. But the problem is, with mental health, there's enough stigma. Take a look at addiction. That's like the stigma. I mean, it's bottom barrel. We don't want to extend our resources. These are people who can be forgotten about. But the reality is the addiction knows no boundaries. I've had clients who didn't touch a drug, they're 58 years old, went in for back surgery, were prescribed Dilaudid, and suddenly developed an addiction to heroin, within a period of 6 months. So that was pretty big. But I really did build a backbone throughout that experience, learned how to deliver difficult news to people. I'm a very, warm-hearted, silly, goofy, like Mr. Rogers. Look at I'm like dressed like Mr. Rogers right now, Mr. Rogers neighborhood type of guy. But again, I was able to learn, as I call it, like Judge Judy mode. I'm like, boom, calling a spade a spade. You need to hold yourself accountable. So that was a big part of that. And then during that time, I was doing some part-time private practice, and then, speaking with other individuals about getting started, our own private practice, and just still, keeping heavy into the leadership experience and networking. And really the other big part that I learned with that outside of the job was the importance of the networking piece, because I feel as though every single opportunity I've gotten, hasn't necessarily been the ones that I went and outreach. They were ones that ultimately came to me. And, there's a lot of value in that. And just being able to have good people there too, especially since, the pandemic, a lot of people I've been doing work with on presentations, writing, getting jobs together and so on. These are the same people I ultimately relied upon, while struggling through the pandemic. To a great extent, I would say I felt like an extrovert forced into an introverted shell. It was very foreign to me. I'm used to always being out and about. So there's no better group of friends and a group of counselors. We talk about the type of support you're going to get there, right? So that was truly amazing, and a ton of value. And just ever since I started this whole entire journey, it's really transformed the way that I perceive and respond to the world. And I want to share that with other people too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I can even relate to quite a bit of that, especially working inpatient for both the mental health and substance use facility, right? You definitely see and hear it all. And it
You
is
do.
tough and it is humbling, just like what you mentioned.
Oh, you do. And, it was interesting. I remember one of my earlier experiences with Walden University as a master's student. I think it was my very first residency. Don't 100% quote me on that, but I think it was the first one. And they had it at the University of Minnesota. And we were in an auditorium. And one of the activities that we did, the instructor kicked off, like, so we're about to show a presentation. And one of the things that's really important is you have to realize that some of the stuff that you're going to be exposed to when you're speaking to clients are things that you've never imagined in your wildest dreams. You haven't pictured these in your nightmares. You haven't seen them in a movie. You haven't read them in a book. You haven't even conceived these types of things. So what you're about to watch is going to be alarming, but we're going to expose you to some very, very, very saddening, types of things. And I remember, at the end of that, I'm looking around the room. Many of my peers are, crying hysterically. A couple of people ran out of the room. I was holding back the tear in my eye. I was trying to be proud, like, okay, like, it was just about there. It really put a hole in my heart. And I realized at that moment, this is really what I'm getting into. This is stuff that's heavy, people's deepest, darkest secrets, things that, a lot of us couldn't even imagine happening, but these are happening to everyday people. These things are happening in my community, and I've just been sheltered to it throughout all this time. So I held on to that lesson, and I will tell you that ever since I started working professionally, I mean, some of the things I've seen and heard, they're astonishing. And even with clients, maybe you've worked with them for a year, year and a half, 2 years or more. Sometimes they drop the bomb on you. They tell you things that were true in their life before they even started to come seeing you. Now they're finally feeling comfortable enough to share it, and it's like, wow. So it really is a humbling experience to be in this position, to be able to help people like that. So that was another big learning experience for me too.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you mentioned also, working or starting at a private practice. So that perfectly segues into our next question. So what
Yes.
was that process that led you to wanting to start your own private practice? And what were some hurdles that you experienced?
Absolutely. So with the private practice piece, again, I've always had big dreams. I'm somebody who just, go the whole way with it.
Mhm.
Always, anything you sign your name to has to be high quality, and I always give my best. I'm not going to say I'm the best. I'm not nowhere close, but I always try to give my best effort and continually improve and so on and so forth. And so, what I'm thinking as a counselor, like, what are some of the biggest things that you could do clinically as a counselor? And the big goal would be that of having your private practice. And instead of just having, my own personal private practice where it's just me working with clients one-on-one, building a practice that has a team, where we're seeing a bunch of clients, something where you could be a clinical director and so on. So that was really my thought. And I was like, okay, so how can we make this work? Now, when I did start with the methadone clinic, as I said a little bit earlier, I was doing some part-time private practice with somebody else who owned hers, and I was able to get my feet wet in terms of what the billing looked like, become familiar as to what the notes look like in that capacity, some of what the behind the scenes look like in that capacity, and so on. So when it came closer to time for me to want to start my own private practice, it was nearing the end of my doctoral program. I knew I was about to take the test, the NCMHCE and the ICRC test. And I was thinking, okay, well, who could be some good people to try to work with in terms of private practice? And as I said, the networking piece was important. I was doing a lot of the virtual networking, whether it was Facebook, LinkedIn, or some of the other counseling servers we have through CSI, ACA, and so on. And I was going around looking for some people in Illinois who impressed me based off their profile. And I reached out to one of them. And I remember I was like, hey, I was like, how's it going? I just want to introduce myself, da da da. And the individual responded, how may I help you? And I responded back, no, how may I help you? And then that ultimately ended up leading to us scheduling a meeting together. And we had a meeting together, remember, in downtown Chicago. We were at the building where we ultimately opened one of our practice locations. And we were just sitting there and we were sharing common experiences. Oh, yeah, I'm involved in ICA. I'm involved in ICA. Oh, yeah, I do this with CS. So do I, and we just had all these different connections. I presented this. I presented this. I've written this. I've done this. It just really felt like a great match. We shared the same vision, mission, had similar types of accomplishments, in the direction we wanted to move forward. But our networking was a bit different because remember, as I was saying, when I was younger, into being a professional, my network was outside in. Well, the person I was partnering with had the inside out type of network. So it was just a perfect, match right there. Knew a lot of people who were actively counseling, had some familiarity through the hospital in terms of what managed care looked like, some of the contracts we can create and so on. So we said, let's do this. So ultimately, we ended up started meeting weekly for a while, and then ultimately started meeting a couple times a week thereafter. Started putting together the paperwork, started working on the insurance paneling, started looking at different locations to start a practice. And when it started off, we had a one-room suite. I'll never forget. We had a one-room suite. We were paying $350 a month for that, and it felt like a lot of money at the time because I know in terms of larger offices and so on. I mean, the office we ultimately landed at the end was a lot more expensive than $350 a month. But the thing was that we didn't want any debt and we didn't have a ton of savings. So we were paying as we went along for this practice. So I remember, paying the first and last month's deposit. I paid the first, my partner paid the last, or, vice versa, put it together. Then we go and pay, the contract to get the LLC, $500 to the state of Illinois with the lawyer and all that good stuff. And then just incrementally started to build this thing up from there. And, it was about 6 months in, the one office suite wasn't enough. So we ended up getting a second room. And then after that, we ended up getting a 5-room suite, expanding into, the downtown Chicago, getting another location in a northern suburb. So just incrementally building up the practice along the time. And I think that that's a really good thought to have there, especially if you're one who doesn't have the business experience, because let's face it, throughout my graduate education, I didn't have a lick of business experience. I didn't have an MBA. I remember there was one class where we had a textbook, paper practice. We probably read 2 pages out of the entire thing. Nothing was provided to this. So a lot of it was really trial and error in the beginning. A lot of mistakes were made. A lot of exciting things took place, but it was a really humbling experience, like going from just spending what little money that we had left over from our paychecks to open the office. And then, the next thing was, okay, now we got to get furniture, going on Craigslist, Facebook garage sale, trying to get these types of things. In terms of billing software, didn't have money for that type of thing. So, ended up going on, on Validity and using the free version of the program. getting that going, or some of the other steps with it, buying used computers, used chairs for the office. In terms of the website, I remember using a Groupon. There was a Groupon on GoDaddy, or for
Wow.
GoDaddy, where it was about 80% off or something, and it covered the first 2 years of our website. So put that together, and it
Wow.
wasn't anything fancy, and I couldn't embed like a client portal or anything like that, HIPAA compliance and so on. The website wasn't geared for that, but it was something we could start promoting ourselves and connecting that to LinkedIn, Facebook, going out into the community, showing up to ICA conference, handing out business cards, and just gradually building the team. And what was helpful too, with my experience being a counselor educator, and as I said, I started Benedict, and recently, since then I've been teaching remote, but I knew a lot of the instructors in the area too, and they'd be like, hey, Matt, I know you got this private practice. How about you start taking interns? So I was able to get supervision experience and just being the clinical director. But with that, getting it started and so on, it was a stressful experience, but an exciting experience. And I would say the excitement outweighed any of the stress that was associated with it. And that's why resiliency is important, because mistakes were made along the way. But it was just great. And getting this started, like I tell people now, just really did everything. Paneling the insurance, doing the billing, answering the phone calls, answering the emails, building the website, taking out the garbage, all that kind of stuff. That's really what it's all about. So it helped me become extremely, extremely well-rounded.
Mhm. All right, perfect. So then what advice would you give someone that's looking to start their own private practice?
I think for anyone starting to build their own private practice, the important thing here is to really realize what it is that you're getting into. A downside of the practice really is that you do have to have your business hat on, as
Mhm.
well as your counseling hat. I have a bleeding heart. I love people. I do free things for the community all the time. I'm seeing pro bono clients here now via telemental health and so on. But you have to remember that there is a bottom line, especially when you are working with a team, you're expanding your practice. We had 3 locations together, none of which were, cheap locations to have, so you have to get paid. And the way it was, I mean, you have to pay your team, to make
Mhm.
sure that we're making ends meet with them. Oftentimes with the team, they were being paid before insurance was reimbursing us. Pay your team before you pay yourself as the owner. So there was a lot of that. So kind of going back to the clinical hat, you're working with clients, you see they're in a bad situation, you really want to help, you offer them, like their insurance just lapsed. So it's like, okay, we could do sliding scale, we could do some pro bono, and then they take advantage of that. They're not paying, throwing it in your face. Now you're stuck with, well, what do I do? Morally, I want to continue helping this client. But financially, my practice is it's gonna sink like a ship if I'm not taking money and being able to pay things. And that's a big part that a lot of people don't realize. You could bill $150 for a session, but if you're taking managed care, Blue Cross giving you 127, so it's pretty close. Maybe United around 100. But some of these other plans are reimbursing you $66, $50, $40, $30, or even less. Sometimes you're waiting 3 months, 6 months to receive the reimbursement, and it could really be an uphill battle as you're trying to expand. In
Mhm.
some of these plans, especially with the Medicaid, that's there for the people who need it most. It is. They're the individuals who are struggling, don't necessarily have a lot of money, they need the assistance and so on. But also, that's a big hoop to be able to jump through. So being able
Mhm.
to find that balance is really difficult. So, like I said, I never had an MBA. I didn't take business courses. I did work a corporate job for 9 years while I was, after I finished undergrad and was in graduate school, I was an intermodal operations coordinator. So I saw the way that a business works, but it's difficult because the counseling mind and the business person mind is a lot different. But you have to be able to find a way to combine the two to be successful. So that's the biggest word of caution that I think that I would stress to anybody else. And you also you want to prepare as best as possible with your informed consent paperwork. Consider what types of things can go wrong, really what you need in terms of the financial piece. We even had a clause in there that said, 3 missed appointments in a row, we do reserve the right to terminate services. Or if you don't pay 3 sessions in a row without communicating to us, creating a payment plan, trust me, bent over backwards with these payment plans and even wrote off a lot of costs. Again, after 3 sessions of that, we can reserve the right to terminate sessions. If you act out, break a boundary, you threaten one of our counselors, you're physically aggressive, things like that, we can terminate. So you want to be able to think about those types of things because situations are going to continually happen. There are a lot of ethical dilemmas that arise. No matter how well prepared you are, ethical dilemmas do arise, and you need to be able to work through those. So the better prepared you are, awesome, but also you have to be ready to be able to put out fires because, like I said, with clients, they share things with me I've never seen before, imagined in my wildest dreams, so on and so forth. And these types of things happen in your practice. And depending on what type of population you're serving, you may see that more or less, but regardless, you will see that. So that resiliency piece is especially important. And that's why we talk about self-care, being able to balance out your life. The more emotionally balanced you are, you're stable, you're able to roll with the punches, at the end of a bad day, go home and still feel fulfilled. That's going to be a really important piece. So, one, making sure you're well educated, you get your stuff, ensuring that you're able to serve in a clinical director type of capacity, remembering that you are the final answer at the practice. If you hire other counselors, interns, and so on, they make a mistake, even without your awareness, guess what? You're the one who's held liable for that, and realize that ultimately you are running a business. So those are some of the things I think that's important to know.
All right, perfect. Yeah, that was a wealth of knowledge and information, and I appreciate that. So
I appreciate you.
I appreciate that too. So just like what you mentioned, you're the guy that's high energy, has to work 12 hours a day and all that stuff. And as I was doing my research on you, seeing how much of the stuff that I missed that you were doing, because, just like what you mentioned in regards to media, right? You have your own podcast, you do a lot of YouTube videos, you do a lot of interviews. I even saw you on TV with, I think, I forgot what the news channel's
Oh,
called.
the WGN Channel 9.
There you go. WGN Channel 9. Yep. And you even have your own TV show called Mental Health Matters. So my next question then is, how has media influenced your practice or what you do and how you help people?
It's influenced things substantially. I'll be completely honest with you there. And it almost has this type of a snowball effect. I know I alluded to it, actually directly stated earlier, about how a lot of the opportunities in my life were ones that ultimately came to me rather than the ones that I sought. Many times I really wanted something. Oh, I'll be president of this. Oh, I want to publish this article. Oh, I want this interview. And, I went for it. And a lot of those things I did ultimately get. But, quite a few of them just didn't end up happening. And, I would find that with every single opportunity that went away, the door that closed, another one, almost usually a better opportunity opened up right after. So it really taught me that, don't become discouraged when something doesn't go your way. Just continue staying optimistic and accept what you can. Don't overwhelm yourself because, again, you have to have the high quality. And I do a lot of things, but you got to pace yourself with what you're doing. So I think a good example of really how this took off, you can kind of equate to my writing, okay? Or even I can go back further, let's say, here, I'm going to go back to the beginning. So, with graduate school, for instance, especially my doctoral program, and I started to do this in the master's, but my doctoral program, as I started writing and such, I'm like, well, Matt, it would make sense that you save every single assignment you've ever written, whether it's a discussion, export it from the discussion post, save it in the Word file. If it's an assignment that you've written, go ahead and you save that. Video you did, go ahead and you save that. And every article you've had to read for class, label it, save it as a PDF, put it in your personal library on your desktop. So I started with this foundation, okay? And as I was getting going, I did a lot of poster presentations, a safe place for a graduate student, and so some of my earlier ones were Chi Sigma Iota, the ACA conferences, CSI days, Illinois Counseling Association offered me some of those here as well. And as I would do the poster presentations, I had times where I remember the one out in Hawaii in 2014 when I was a fellow. It was on a Sunday at 9 a.m. No one came. The only people who came to watch the poster presentations were other poster presenters who had nobody show up to the thing. And I remember being discouraged because they had 100 handouts and nobody took any of them except the other poster presenters. I probably handed out 8. And then the next year I had a poster presentation. I'm going to be honest with you, I only brought 50 instead of the 100 they asked me for. So that was bad. So I brought the 50, not thinking I'd give out more than 5. And before my presentation even started, they were all gone. And people were asking me, where are your handouts? They had hundreds of people show up to this thing. But kind of what I want to get at. So I started having all the homework assignments, and I'd have article opportunities. Be like, hey, can you write this 1-page article on something? Look at my homework assignment. I had all the citations, references there. Oh, I've got this. I would take it, copy and paste it into a doc, build upon it, gear it to whatever it was that I was writing for, send it off. Oh, Matt, that's awesome. Great. Okay. Hey, do you want to do a presentation based off this? We can get you a poster. Sure. Make a bunch of slides, put them on a poster, boom, give that presentation. And then people will come up, ask questions, and feel a bit more confident next year. Oh, why don't you do a roundtable, 50-minute roundtable? You'll give a formal presentation. You got 10 people sitting with you, did that, answered the questions, had, got some more insight, and then was able to turn it into a formal, hour-long presentation at a conference. And that led to keynotes. Same type of thing with the writing. So with writing, it would start off as 1-page articles that were then 3-page articles that were then formal articles that were being peer reviewed and so on. And, a really huge turning point for me, I think it was the end of 2019. I had the CEO and CFO, the founders of Choosing Therapy, a lot like Psychology Today, if you're familiar with them. They called me up. They're like, hey, we found this article that you wrote in Counseling Today, this interview that was done. And, we actually watched the podcast from the Thoughtful Counselor. And we're really impressed with what you're doing. And we started looking up some of your other stuff. You did a great job at Walden. You're writing these articles. You did something for IMHCA. And, we're really impressed by you. Would you be interested in being one of our content writers, one of our first writers? We want you to be our addiction specialist. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, sure. So, a few months later, I only had one article, kind of started off slow, and 6 months later, like, here, we can give you 2 articles a month. So I started doing that. And a few months later, they started connecting with journalists and doing these media entries. And so what they would do is every day I would get sent random questions in an email, or like, here's 3 parts to this question. This is for WebMD, or this is Healthline. This is for Men's Health, for Newsweek, New York Times, all these different places. I haven't gotten the New York Times one yet, but we're working on that. But all those other places I've been fortunate enough to ultimately get. But with that, I remember when I was starting, I would get these opportunities, and maybe about 15% of them were picked up. I'm telling you, maybe like 1 in every 8 to 9, somewhere in there, would get picked up. So I did that, and I was writing these, about daily, and so maybe 2 a month I would get picked up at first, and then 2021 rolled around. I noticed 1 in every 3 I would write would get picked up. I'm like, okay, this is pretty good. Now I'm getting a few of these a month. They've got my big content articles, still presenting, teaching, awesome. 6 months after that, every other one I was writing was getting picked up. I'm like, whoa, wait, hold on, what's going on? And then fast forward into 2022. Now these journalists are directly reaching out to me. They're like, hey, here, you got a guaranteed slot. Here's a guaranteed slot. Here's a guaranteed slot. Wow. And then that opened up the opportunity for me to start writing books. With my very first book in 2021, You're Refining Your Callings, they reached out to me because of an article I did with Choosing Therapy on love addiction. They're like, hey, we want you to write a book on love addiction. Are you interested? And I was interested, wanted to write my first book. They're like, well, you get 10 weeks to write the book. I'm like, whoa, 10 weeks, that's pretty intense. And this is right when I took on T-ball coaching. My kids are young, and we're pregnant with me, like all this stuff's going on. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll take it on. And there, some extended long nights with that. But the guy, he's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about love addiction? I'm like, well, maybe an 8.5. He's like, that's not good enough. He's like, based off this interview, you're a warm guy, you're compassionate. I can tell that you're very enthusiastic. You could write something amazing. He's like, so I'm going to get back to you in the new year. And I got anxious because I didn't hear back for a couple months. It was past the deadline. I didn't think they were going to follow up. He came back with this outline, You're Finding Your Callings. And it sang to me. So I was able to write this book, daily entries, all of them are original. Less I was able to write 3 famous quotes per month I was able to take, but wrote this thing out. Every 2 weeks I had a deadline. So every 3 months, 2 weeks I would do, follow the theme of the season. So the holidays within every single month. Book starts off with formulating a goal, goes into interpersonal skills, relieving yourself of bias, how to not be an ignorant person, making your own luck, all these topics, and ultimately ends with leaving your legacy. And, it was really great. And this book is written for a general audience. And, with that, though, if you read it as a counselor, you'll see that most of the psychology theories are in there. There's a cognitive restructuring process that goes in, but it was written for a general audience, and it's one that you follow daily, go through the activities. Now, it's funny, this past year, I had a couple children's books released, The Dinosaur Door and A Year Good Morning Sunshine. And those were books I actually wrote when my children were little. I wrote those back in 2018. And what was funny at the time is I was, writing every day, trying to find a publisher who would take me on. I was looking for children books illustrators, and they just really shot me down. Like shot me down left and right at the time. I remember one specifically said that, oh yeah, I'm the person who publishes the children's books. I reached out to the person. Oh, I don't do children's books. I was like, your profile updated a week ago says that that's your specialty. Is my book that bad? Really? So
Wow.
anyway, it just became something I was reading to my kids, for, a year. My son made me read it every night without the pictures. We're sharing it with colleagues. And people are like, I think you got something here. This is a really good book. And so, last year, a publisher reached out to me with a self-publishing opportunity. I said, let's go for it. And, boom, both those came out. And, I couldn't do the book readings. I wanted to do book readings at the year of Finding Your Callings, but, I did some presentations. I did a keynote presentation at Wisconsin Counseling Association and
Mhm.
one for Yorkville University. It kind of compiled everything I was thinking for this book in an hour presentation, but with these two children's books, which has been excited, I'm going to schools, library, reading to a bunch of little kids who really love it and
Wow.
get excited, and again, that warms my heart because like I say, I came into all of this, interested in helping children get off on the right path. I'm a big kid myself, have my 3 kids. So those are really personal to me, those books here. So it was fun seeing those come to fruition. And all the while, he was continuing to do all these other things. So really what I'm trying to get at, case in point to this story, is that things start to build up over time. It does take a while. Some people might hit success instantaneously overnight. That wasn't me. I've had a lot of success earlier on in my career, but really to get things going, it's just, continuing to build upon, seeing that snowball effect come together, and the opportunities now just keep coming. And, like something like this, like you reaching out to me, was a really great, I was so happy to be able to have this conversation. But that's the thing, just to be able to look forward to that, but to be able to get to that point, yeah, you do have to do some digging. You do have to put yourself out there. May have some uncomfortable situations where you do hear the no and you feel like you're not going to get it. But like I talked about with graduate school, feels like forever. Sometimes you want to give up. You see the light at the end of the tunnel and it smacks you across the face. Same thing professionally. Things start off slow, maybe 10, 12% of what you're writing is out there, but then eventually they're coming to you with guaranteed opportunities. So,
Yeah.
but the other piece, I do want to share this too. So, from a financial standpoint, I think this is important to realize too, is that a lot of these opportunities are unpaid. So, a lot of the media quotes that I write, I don't get reimbursed for those other than getting my name out there. A lot of the presentations I do for the community, the conferences, I don't get paid for those. I just do those as a charitable type of thing. Some of the conferences, now I'm at a point where maybe I get a free conference fee or they'll pay, for the hotel, but even still, sometimes I pay to be at the conference as well.
Mhm.
So that's another piece to really think about. Are you willing to do this work for free to get your name out there? Is that something of value to you? Because if you're not, and you're waiting for this big opportunity, suddenly I want to be the $5,000 keynote speaker. Well, yeah, I mean, again, that's maybe an instant success story that's few and far between. For the most part, you're going to have to continue working at it. So a lot of free stuff is going to have to be part of it.
Yeah, that is 100% true. You got to get your
Mhm.
name out there somehow.
You
But
do, you do. And so, I mean, getting my name out there is worth more to me than getting paid a small nominal fee to do something. And plus, just being able to spread the message and be able to get people to a better place, that's worth than any monetary value, certainly.
oh yeah, definitely. So then putting in all this work, right?
Mhm.
And even like I mentioned earlier, you also have a podcast and a TV show. So what was that process of you starting that podcast and TV show?
Well, I mean, especially with so in terms of doing the different podcasts and such, I've been a guest on a lot of different podcasts, and was looking to get some started. And to be honest, the podcast didn't have as much traction at first because it didn't. And again, it didn't have the name, wasn't as well known at the time. But what ultimately ended up happening with the show that gained traction, at least in the local community, and I would see the ratings. I don't know how many people have actually watched this thing, but that was an interesting experience too, because I always wanted to be on TV. Here I am teaching virtual classes and doing webinars and so on. And, might as well be a TV show host. So I remember for a year, it was in 2018, kept trying to reach out to the producer of the local TV network, Bolingbrook Community Television, and wasn't hearing back. And so I took a chance and I wrote our mayor at the time. I was like, hey, it's like, I'm interested in doing this show. And then pitched the idea to him. Within a half hour, I got an agreement to do the show, and it started start a week later.
Wow.
So it started a week later, yes. And what we did is we would do 4 episodes a month. I would shoot 2 of them at a time. So went in every other week. I shot the first pilot episode by myself, kind of laying out my thoughts about mental health, my passion for it, what the show is going to look like, and so on. And then from there, just had people in the community, who were doing different things. Maybe they were musicians, maybe there were people working at the hospital, maybe there were people teaching at the school, working with special education. I had a physical trainer come in who owns a gym and so on. So just have all these different guests who would come into the show and we would talk about different mental health topics. And, it was interesting because, like I said, I didn't see the ratings. But I would go and I would put this. I had a Mental Health Matters page, and put it on my website and share it, with other people and so on. And it was interesting because people would reach out. Maybe I wouldn't get very many comments on my page, but in terms of direct messages, instant messages, private, whatever you want to call these things, people would be reaching out to me all the time, like, "Hey, Matt, I love what it is that you're doing. I learned a valuable lesson. I've got this going on in my life. What type of recommendations do you have for this?" And those types of things were starting to happen on a weekly basis. And so with that show, it was able to help me be able to connect with people directly, be able to spread the different type of message, and also gave me some additional practice, for some of the other work that I'm doing. Be a little bit more concise, be a little bit more articulate. Don't talk with your hands like you do all the time. As I have my hands down, they're moving around a lot here. But that was a really great experience, and also was able to connect me further with the community. Even like since then, I'm doing a lot of other types of things for Bolingbrook community, as well as in the state and nationally and so on. So it was a great way to be able to tie things in together. I don't know. Like I said, big ball of energy, like getting ideas out there.
Right. All right. So you heard it here, folks. Reach out to your mayor. You'll get lucky.
Yeah, you can. You certainly can. It worked out for me quite well. Yes.
Right. So as I was doing more research on you, I was looking through your Mental Health Matters, your YouTubes, your podcasts, and things like that. And one of the main things that you have on there, besides self-care and things like that, is
Mhm.
social justice.
Yes.
So I was looking at the interviews you did with one Diana Mondragon. I used to go to school with her. She's awesome. And
Shout out to Diana. Diana, you
yep,
are awesome. Yes.
very awesome. Right. And you talked with her about, important considerations for counseling in the Hispanic and Latinx
Hmm.
community. Then also I watched this other one with, I believe her name was Vanessa Cook, with the importance of
Yes.
Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And that was also amazing as well. So I guess my question here is, how has your social justice lens evolved over the years, and what are you doing differently, both professionally and personally, because of that involvement of your social justice lens?
I would say that it's evolved substantially, to be completely honest with you. Growing up in Bolingbrook community, it was a diverse community. It was one of those types of communities where it was, like 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 African American, about a third white. And then we had a mix of other, type of demographics. Father was from Chicago Heights, so I spent a lot of time in Chicago Heights growing up. Again, a lot of minority population out there. And mom from the Joliet area, and again, fairly diverse out there. So I had friends of all sorts of diversity, and we participated in sports together, we were in band together, we were in class together, so on and so forth. The community was a safe one. Never had to worry about gang violence on the street. I remember the one and only time I saw graffiti on the school in the morning. By the time I left, it was gone. Like that was the type of community that I grew up in. And, in high school, I remember I listened to a lot of hip hop music. We were all rapping, writing flows together. I was, a huge White Sox fan, and just really embracing the culture of, those around me. And, I thought it was a great thing. But at the same time, it also made me colorblind. And I was very ignorant going into undergraduate school because we would discuss different diversity issues. I'm like, this isn't happening. There's not oppression like this, right? Like, these types of things aren't happening. And yeah, that was a major wake-up call for me. So once I did, start to have that level of awareness of what was going on, the way that I looked at individuals as I did start seeing in color, starting to realize some of the hardships that individuals have been through, started realizing some of the privileges I do have as a white individual. Although, I wouldn't say life was easy growing up, a lot of hard work. There are a lot of privileges that were just naturally afforded to me. So being able to kind of flip some of the discussions that I would have, with some of my diverse peers and really what is your experience like, and becoming more in tune with that and so on. So I did make it my mission to be more attentive to that, pay attention to the different different issues and such that were going on. And when I started becoming an instructor at Southern New Hampshire University, we had different classes that we were able to teach, and I was excited. I got to be a subject matter expert to put together our addiction course. I'm like, yay, I built a course. I get to course lead it and so on. But one of the classes I was put into was the diversity course. And I remember the very first time I was teaching the diversity course, and this has happened since. I now actually course lead the diversity course. But I remember in the opening journal that students would have, and it asked, well, what are your thoughts on diversity? How do you feel about coming into this class? Like, what are your biases? When have you felt other, and so on? And they had a student who specifically commented, I find it quite bizarre and almost offensive that in a diversity class that I have a white male instructor who's teaching this. Like, that's a pretty ignorant place to start. And I wrote back to the student. I said, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I was like, I appreciate that greatly. I asked for an honest response, and that's what I received. I was like, and hopefully throughout our time working together, you're going to be able to see that I truly do care, that I am learning. I'm not perfect. I do acknowledge some of the privileges I have, and so on and so forth. I was like, but let's see where we can get working through this class together. By the end of the class, wow. Okay, I realized that coming into this class that I was the one who was judging you. And although I have experienced, episodes of discrimination, racism, and so on, I immediately came in looking at you as a white male of privilege and thought that you were just like everybody else. And I judged you and had such a positive experience in this class, learned a lot. And now I see how racism can work both ways. And that was huge. And, from that point forward, I made it a point to really, immerse myself as much in that class as possible. Fast forward a little bit to 2020, when we had the senseless, murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Aubrey, like all these different, things that we were seeing with police brutality, hate crimes, and so on. These things have been going on, throughout our entire existence since the beginning of the nation. And we talk about the importance of media. A lot of people were seeing these things on Facebook or seeing them posted on Instagram, Twitter feeds, on the news all over the place. And news travels in an instant. And so many people are thinking, oh, well, this is a new thing. Now all of a sudden we're as bad as we were during, before the civil rights activism and so on. It's like, no, these types of things have always been there. Now we're able to shed a light on it, and we need to do something about it. So we would have different panels with the instructors, different panels with the community, and we're talking about this. And, one of the things that was really problematic, especially as being a white male and trying to be an ally and so on, is so many people become defensive. Well, I'm not racist. I haven't laughed at a joke or said anything racial. I have friends of all colors and so on, but you're not really getting it. One of the things we need to realize is that, with something like white privilege, it's not putting a finger and saying you're a bad person, you should feel bad and like get on the defense. What it's saying is you do need to be in tune with the reality of the world. You need to recognize as a white person in many communities, some of which I have students in states that are 98.6% white. It blows my mind. I'm like, wait, really? These do exist out there. And, it is uncomfortable for a lot of people, who are from oppressed minority groups to walk in these communities without getting that evil glare or worrying that they're going to, get their pockets checked in a store or be pulled over, because they didn't make a full stop at the stop sign and so on. Like, this type of stuff is going on, and we need to be in tune with what that is. We need to be there and be supportive to one another. We need to not force ourselves on somebody else, with the assistance, but when, it is welcomed, be there, recognize we have to focus on equity. We want to talk about equality and giving equal opportunities to individuals. Well, let's face it though, based off the systemic racism, institutionalized racism, intergenerational trauma that we see follows people, whether they realize it or not, everything's written on your RNA. So if you have, your ancestors who did deal with slavery, dealt with oppression, dealt with things before civil rights and so on, you have a genetic predisposition to be especially anxious or depressed through this type of stuff. You're raised in this environment. We need to be aware of what's going on. And really the best way to do that is to break that. And we need to take a look at equity versus equality. And what I mean by equitable is that for people who are at a disadvantage, or people who are in an area that doesn't have the finances and so on, making sure that we're giving them a little bit more to be able to equalize the playing field a bit more. Because to say just do everything equal, the people who are ahead are going to stay ahead, the people who are toward the bottom are going to stay at the bottom, and that's not the spirit of what we're doing. And to be completely honest with you, just the things that I've seen, the political divisiveness and the things that have been said, out in the nation, the bills we're trying to pass and so on, and Coresair, it makes me sick. It makes me sick. And, something better needs to be done, and we all need to be able to work together on this. So that's a big part of what my mission is being able to provide the best support I possibly can in caring for all types of people, but also realizing myself that I have been afforded different privileges. I can't say that I've had the same experience as an individual from, an oppressed type of population, because I don't. I mean, I can empathize as best as possible, and trust me, I do. But to say I've had that same type of experience, that's just ignorant. And that's the type of thing that we really need to focus on to make sure that we're, doing here better. And this goes to any type of oppressed population beyond the color of your skin, LGBTQIAP plus population, individuals, with disabilities, whether they're apparent or invisible types of ones. And that's another area we need to focus on. Individuals who do have disabilities we can't see, we're not doing as great of a job as we need to there. Some of the stuff that I'm seeing with ageism is quite sad. Recently went into a senior community and hearing many of the resources that they're lacking that they were promised. We need to do a better job. Where we're at is unacceptable, but I think that we are continuing to get to a better place.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. Yep, we do need to do a better job, but we are moving forward though.
We are. We really are. And that's another big part of, why I celebrate this counseling profession. I really love seeing some of the different divisions that we have that are focused on, the celebration of diversity. And, I remember like growing up too, and it was kind of a weird term to me too. It's like, oh, racial tolerance. I'm like, well, what's racial tolerance? I'm like, so I'm just going to tolerate you? Like we can sit in the same room, we can share the same space and just, okay, well, you're there. It's like, no, it needs to really be about the acceptance. And that's how you feel fulfilled. And I'm telling you too, everybody has so many great, insights, traditions, values, beliefs, and so on, that when we're able to combine the best of the best with all of these, we can truly do something amazing and continue to move the world forward. And that's what we need. I mean, because, let's face it, we're becoming more diverse by the day. And either you're going to accept this and you're going to make the best of it and have a celebration with it, or you're just going to continue to struggle and become more ignorant. And we can't have that. We can't. We need to do a better job with our younger generations too, by modeling the appropriate behavior. Unfortunately, despite the big mess of things I was just talking about with what we're seeing in the nation, I do believe that we are overall moving forward, not as fast as I would like to see. We are starting to move forward, but there are still a lot of blind spots that need to be addressed.
Oh yeah, definitely. So then, well, not to move on from that topic to the next one, because I'm pretty sure we could talk about that for hours.
Yes, we can.
Right, but I want to bring attention back, though, to your book that's currently out on Amazon, A Year of Finding Your Calling, Daily Practices to Uncover Your Passion. All right, so I know you mentioned at one point you were asked to write something else. You were only given 10 weeks, and I was like, oh, whoa, no. Right, but then you were approached with this other opportunity. So what is your book writing process, or how long did it take you to write that book?
Well, that book specifically, I was given a 10-week deadline to get it done. And then, they spent about 2 weeks going through and reviewing it themselves. And then I had about 2 weeks to be able to finalize the book. So with that book, it was interesting because really all they said is, here you're writing, you're finding your callings, you need an entry for every single day. Everything needs to be original, except you can include 3 quotes from like a celebrity or humanitarian, somebody like that. But everything needs to be original. We want to see anecdotes. We want to see positive reflections, affirmations. We want different types of activities, reflections, so on and so forth. So when I was going to put this together, there was minimal guidance for what to do here. And the best thing I could think of was, okay, well, I'm starting on January 1st, New Year's resolutions. And how do New Year's resolutions fail? Because we take on too many, we have no plan. So it starts off with identifying a dream and making it to a goal, and then you formulate your goal. And then, going into the next month, February, we have Black History Month. We focus a lot on, cultural, celebration and so on. So that month is about taking a look at your bias, explains implicit bias, what it looks like to be able to open up and free yourself of the ignorance and be more accepting of other people. March, I kind of go with this theme of making your own luck. That was one of those things that would kill me. I get my PhD after sleeping 3 hours a day for 8 years. I remember, my mom's like, "Oh, you're so lucky to have gotten that." It's like, well, I feel fortunate, to be able-bodied and minded, to be able to do this and have this opportunity and so on. But it's not like a leprechaun at the end of a rainbow with a pot pot of gold. It was like, oh, here, Matt, here's your PhD. There's a lot of work that went into it. So March focuses on all of that, and it just continues to follow, kind of monthly themes, seasonal themes, holiday themes, and so on. All the way through the end of December, where you're leaving your legacy. So kind of like focusing even on end of life type of thoughts. So what it looks like to leave your legacy, and then preparing for the new year up ahead. But all the while, you're realizing here that you could start the process of change at any point. The book is written for a general audience, so there's very general types of terms. It's relatable. It's something that I really did try to focus on being as culturally diverse as possible, to a general audience. So really trying to think that most anybody who reads it, that it can apply to them, but also did go through with consideration of all the different psychological theories. So you'll see a lot of, cognitive behavioral therapy in there. There's a lot of dialectical behavioral therapy in there. See some of the narrative in there. You'll see some psychoanalysis. So a lot of those different things are put in combination, just to do this restructuring. And I do think that, with the book, if you follow it step by step, there's a lot of value. But I will say, it even says when you open it up in the forward, please take this one day at a time, because if you read it all the way through without processing it, well, it's just like any other book. You're not going to get much value in it. It's not, maybe the first time you see it, you can go from beginning to end, but it's really meant to go through the activities each and every day. And then, sometimes you have a week and then you go and you revisit what you started a week ago. So it is meant to be intentional with it. And fortunately, for those who've been through it, it's been out for about a year and a half now. For those who did go through it in 2022, I've heard some really positive things in terms of how it changed. And to be honest with you too, this book is written based off the way I really think. These are the types of things that help me change. And a lot of the stuff that I'm saying to my students, I'm saying to my clients. So yeah, there's a lot of value in that. And like I said, it was a little different. Can't really do a book reading of daily entries, but I've been fortunate enough to put together a couple presentations on that I've done, like I said, for Wisconsin Counseling Association, for Yorkville University. I've done it for Southern New Hampshire University's nursing department. And the presentation I put together there was how to go beyond self-care. So, really even a big part of this too is positive psychology. Martin Seligman, really love everything he says there. He's like, why would we go from a bad place to a neutral place when we go from the bad place to a great place? I love, he's quoted in a TED Talk speaking to the effect of, a lot of people, they come in, maybe have, major depressive disorder, recurrent severe, suicidal ideation, so they come in to see a therapist and they go from, the point of severe suicidal ideation to no longer feeling suicidal, maybe having major depressive disorder, recurrent, mild, something like that, but they're not really getting that big quality of life. So why would we go from -10 to 0 when we can take that all the way to, a 5, a 6, a 7, 8, 9, 10, and really maximize the quality of life? And that's a big focus of what this is too. So going from surviving to thriving, that's a big thing that a lot of us do miss. And I laugh as a counselor, I have yet to have the client who comes in and is like, hey, Matt, my life is good right now, but I want it to be great, and that's why I'm seeing you. Never does that happen, but it should happen. A lot of people see life coaches, but counselors can do a lot of that type of work too. And we have to realize as well that all of us at some point in time, and I'll tell you, 2022 was a very difficult year for me, with a lot of loss that occurred and so on. Very difficult. And we all have these different types of times in our life. We could use a little bit of additional support and guidance, but really a lot of that begins with the self-awareness piece, and the book focuses on that. The more self-aware you are of self, the more self-aware you are of others, and that's where wisdom is cultivated and ultimately begins flourishing. So the book really tries to focus on all those types of themes.
All right, perfect. Well, as you know, all good things must come to an end. So we're down to our final 3 questions. Right.
All right.
So before we get to the most important question, we got to ask the first 2. All right, so the first one, I know you've imparted a lot of knowledge and wisdom onto us. And I just want to make sure I give you the chance to say, basically, is there anything would you like to tell people that are starting out in the field or have been in the field for a while?
The big thing that I will tell you is, I know, especially as being a counselor educator now, I know it looks a little bit redundant. Self-care is embedded into every single class. We're doing all these presentations. We talk about it constantly. It's a very common sense thing. Take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. A car without gas can't drive. Very common sense type of things. But as individuals who have bleeding hearts, who want to continue giving their all to others, we're being very selfless. I'm telling you, if you continue burning the candle at both ends, you will ultimately burn out. And I promise you that, even as somebody, even being somebody with very high energy, I look back at my master's internship and I remember I was sleeping 3.5 hours a day. I would drive home on the highway, from Maywood to Yorkville, Illinois, and it was about an hour drive at the time. And I would be on the highway. There were a couple times on 88 where like I heard the on the shoulder. I almost fell. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a wake up call and terrifying for me and said, Matt, you need to tap the brakes. There were certain times I was taking on different articles and tasks and finding myself jaded. Like, this is a great opportunity, but I really didn't have the time for this. And I'm doing it more so to benefit the other person than myself, especially if I was doing a ghostwriting type of task. You need to realize in this field that the opportunities are always going to be out there. There's always going to be the need. The work is never going to end, and the only way you could break that up is by being diligent with it. Be intentional and consistent with your self-care. Now, of course, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. If you have an amazing opportunity, like to give a little bit of a biography of yourself to IMHCA with Coresair Mack, you jump all over that type of thing.
Yeah.
But for real, like some of the other stuff, if you don't find as much value in it, if it's outside of your wheelhouse, you don't have the time for it, just remember that every single time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. And unfortunately, the thing you're oftentimes saying no to is self-care, time for yourself, time with loved ones, the things that you really need. So pace yourself. That's important. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And that was a big piece of advice that was given to me by my mentors as a student. I really didn't listen. I didn't listen until on the side of the highway and some of the other times, that I found myself getting stressed out. Resiliency is a big key as well. Being able to roll with the punches, being able to work through a pandemic, being able to, pick things up after you've been sick or you're going through a down spot or you're going through grieving and so on. Take the time you need for yourself, pace yourself to be able to get back on track. Resiliency is the big key to all of this. Yes, being intelligent is a huge advantage. Things come easier to you. You may think more quickly and so on. But really, that resiliency piece is going to be the thing that carries you forward. And just really, remember why you came into this field to begin with. It really has to be about being a compassionate person. Even before beginning graduate school, half the battle's already won or lost. Either you have the personality characteristics to be a counselor or you don't. So I think the content is extremely difficult in this field. No, it's not. I don't think it's rocket science. It's rocket science. Rocket scientists will tell you rocket science is easy and maybe this stuff is more difficult. But content wise, it's not all that hard. It'll come together. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of investment and so on, but if you don't have that compassion for people, if you can't proceed in a non-judgmental way, if you're not empathic, you're not empathetic, you're not practicing unconditional positive regard, clients are going to ultimately see through that. You're going to find yourself jaded more. You're not going to establish a rapport and you're going to burn out because you're being a fraud. So half that battle is already won before you get in it. So never lose sight of why you got in here in the first place and what you're doing it for. And I know I said earlier with private practice, the big challenge is being the business person versus being the, the individual with the bleeding heart counselor. And we do have to find the balance. But even still, when it came to making a business decision or being a human being, the human being side would almost always win, less in an event where, the bottom line really would fall out. But just, you have to carry that onward. This is a field where you really do need to care about people. It's not something you should be faking. I hope you're not faking it. So those are some of my big keys I have there.
All right, perfect. Always imparting all that knowledge and wisdom on us, and I appreciate that. So that brings us to our second to last question before we get to the most important one.
Okay.
So you said a lot of stuff, and I
did.
appreciate you saying a lot of stuff. That really helps me out, and that'll hopefully help out all the people that are going to be watching this also. So then, is there anything else that you would like to say that I haven't had a chance to ask you?
Really, the big thing that I would like to say is I feel extremely fortunate to be here. I do. Going back to the beginning of this interview, I said I've kind of lost my way a little bit. I was really disappointed with the chemistry and the pre-med bioengineering thing. And, just that MMPI2, it really changed my life. Like I said, the hair on my arms, back of my neck stood on end. I got that tingly feeling throughout my entire body just to be be a psychologist, to be a teacher. And I moved forward, never looked back. And I feel so grateful, that I was able to find what I believe is truly my calling in life. I love everything about counseling, whether it's actually sitting in the clinical seat and doing my counseling, teaching a class, whether it's remote or face-to-face, presenting, writing, advocating, entrepreneurship of everything, advocating on behalf of social justice, so on and so forth, just loving every single thing about this. And I think the further that you live with passion, the more fulfilled you're going to be with this job. And it was funny, with the corporate job, it was a hectic job, and sometimes I felt like, just like, this isn't me. This is so not me. And I had tons of emails, yelled at all the time. It was kind of like that movie Office Space with the TPS report. You made a mistake, you had 7 people to respond to with it. It was like that. But the job wasn't nearly as stressful, and there wasn't as much on the line as there is now. We have people's lives at stake right now, and we're working with them as therapists. This is a medical profession. And, I would just get so stressed out with that job because I found no value in it. And every day I'm like, I'm just making a rich person richer. And just, this isn't like who I am. And like now, I can have the most stressful situations brought in front of me, but at the end of the day, I can calm down. I feel fulfilled. I see that I'm part of the bigger thing. And it's truly my calling in life. And that's something that I really want to share with other people. I'll do everything I can to try to show you that this is an amazing field. And I hope that this is your calling, because once you find that and you hold on to it, I assure you that this is going to be one of the greatest things in your life. I mean, family love and so on, be the greatest thing in your life, but professionally, this can be one of the greatest things in your life. And, something to really, never look back from. And I just love the whole lifelong learning. I love, being able to think about people in a completely different way than I have before. And just, it's truly, truly a special field to be involved in.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I agree with that 100%.
Oh, the additional part. Okay, so here's
Yeah.
the additional part I forgot about a second ago, is
Mhm.
that, that whole saying, and I laugh at this one, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Well, I laugh at that because I work very hard and I feel every single bit of the work, but tying into that stress, when you do what you love, yeah, you do work all those days in your life, but again, you feel more fulfilled. You don't feel as though you're wasting your time. You see the bigger picture of what you're doing. And because of that, it can continue moving forward until I avoid the burnout. So that was a little tie-in I wanted there. Sorry.
No, no problem. Perfect. So then, most important question. So where can people find you or contact you if they're looking to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, multiple ways to be able to get in touch with me. I do have a website now, www.counselingbyglowiak.com. So it's spelled out as it is, but all one word. And also, you can reach me at my Gmail account. It's doctors, so dr period m Glowiak at gmail.com. And gladly respond. On Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. If you do Google search, type in my name, whether it's Matthew, Matt, doctor, PhD, whatever you want. You find a bunch of different articles that I do have. You'll notice each year in terms of a lot of the professional writing, it's kind of varied up. Like I said, addiction's my specialty, so you'll see a lot of addiction writing. This past year, I've been writing a lot on bipolar disorder. Year before, I was writing about a lot of process disorders and other types of addictions not included in the DSM-5, which is now DSM-5-TR. So a lot of different unique types of things on there. But if you do go to the website, counselingbyglowiak.com, I will acknowledge it is a little bit outdated, but you'll see a bunch of my different videos from Mental Health Matters with Dr. Matt, a bunch of the articles they had, the full-length ones, as well as some of the media quotes. You'll have an area for the book, areas for inquiries, and so on. And hopefully you're able to find some value. But probably the most up-to-date thing to see what I'm doing on a consistent basis would be connecting with me on LinkedIn. So I'm always posting any new article, videos. I put this on there as soon as that's ready to go too.
All right, perfect. Well, you heard it here, folks. Find it all, counselingbyglowiak.com. You'll get a lot of content, a lot of information. So definitely check that out. All righty. Other than that, that is it for this interview. Again, thank you, Matt, for joining me today.
Hey, thank you very much for this opportunity again. I'm humbled and honored by this. You're somebody I've always highly admired and respected. I knew when you were a student you were going to be somebody who goes far, and look at you now. You're president at IMHCA. So just absolutely amazing. I know the organization is in great hands. I do know that I'm here to continue supporting you in whatever type of capacity. I'm looking forward to moving forward here together.
All right, perfect. And I appreciate that. All right, everybody, that'll be it for this interview. Thank you very much. This is Coresair Mack, president of the Illinois Mental Health Council Association, signing out, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.